we're moving into a different aspect of this, with the ceasefire. I do think the violations of the ceasefire in terms of firing into Israel or at U.S. bases, some of that will just sort it out in the next 48 hours. But we gave up using military operations as a leverage to get a deal here by making a ceasefire. It doesn't mean, Martha, that we don't still have leverage, because we truly do. And that leverage is making certain that the Iranians understand this is a 2-week deadline and a 2-week deadline only. And if you don't accept our conditions that we're putting forward in Islamabad, and we can't get a deal in 2 weeks, then we are absolutely going to return to combat operations. That is real leverage.
We are moving into a different aspect of this with the ceasefire, but we gave up using military operations as a leverage. It does not mean that we don't still have leverage. This is a 2-week deadline and a 2-week deadline only. If you don't accept our conditions, we are actually going to return to combat operations. That is real leverage. Analysis. Keane openly acknowledges the trade-off. By agreeing to the ceasefire, they gave up using military operations as a leverage, yet insists we still have leverage through a hard 2-week deadline. He frames returning to combat operations as a credible threat, turning the pause into a structured window rather than a surrender. The words real leverage are repeated for emphasis, showing the U.S. still holds cards even after stepping back from immediate strikes. Takeaway: a temporary ceasefire doesn't erase leverage. It can sharpen it when paired with a firm, public deadline. Follow for more expert breakdowns like this. Hit follow now so you never miss the next segment.
And what the Iranians are going to be about in those negotiations, because it is predictable. It's like dealing with Putin. The Iranians here are going to want to delay and extend the negotiations and convince our negotiators that they really are close to making a deal, but we need a little bit more time. Then what happens? Let's extend the ceasefire another week or two, and maybe a little bit further than that when we get closer to the deal. What are the Iranians up to in doing this? What they truly want is as much time as possible to delay, to let the recovery of oil prices, the recovery of the political system itself, and take the pressure off of the president that certainly, understandably, he feels, so that his inclination after...
What the Iranians will be about in those negotiations. It's like dealing with Putin. Want to delay and extend the negotiations. Convince our negotiators that they really are close to making a deal, but we need a little bit more time. Extend the ceasefire another week or two to let the recovery of oil prices take the pressure off of the president. Analysis. Keane calls the Iranian playbook predictable, comparing it directly to dealing with Putin. He predicts they will delay and extend the negotiations, using phrases like close to making a deal and need a little bit more time to stretch the ceasefire, while they pursue recovery of oil prices and political breathing room. The analysis exposes the risk of fatigue. After several weeks of not making any progress, the U.S. side might hesitate to resume combat operations. Takeaway: authoritarian negotiators often weaponize time. Recognizing the delay tactic early prevents losing hard-won leverage. How long do you think Iran will try to drag this out?
They're on the other path, and they're willing to give up the conditions and meet the conditions that President Trump's team is laying down, all for the better. I'm just highly skeptical about them. This much I know. One, we have severely damaged Iran, and they are in a much weakened condition, to be sure. And our military people have laid that out in spades to that damage. But they're still in charge, and believe me, Vahidi, the IRGC leader, and Gabalov, the Speaker of the Parliament, they are hardliners as much as anybody else who's been in charge of Iran. And that is why this ceasefire has taken place, because they knew full well that the only objective they had in closing the Straits of Hormuz was to stop the war. And they have achieved that. But
we have severely damaged Iran, and they are in a much weakened condition. The IRGC leader and the Speaker of the Parliament, they are hardliners. This ceasefire is taking place because they know fully well that the only objective in closing the Straits of Hormuz was to stop the war, and they have achieved that. Analysis. Despite the damage, severely damaged Iran, much weakened condition. Keane stresses the regime's core remains defiant with hardliners, like the IRGC leader, still in charge. He explains the ceasefire exists solely because Iran achieved its immediate goal. Closing the Straits of Hormuz was to stop the war. The words reveal a paradox. Iran is hurting but not broken, buying time while its leadership stays uncompromising. Takeaway: military damage weakens a regime's options, but hardliner control can still prolong conflict unless pressure is sustained. Follow for more expert breakdowns like this. Hit follow now so you never miss the next segment.
The reality is, if they're truly willing to make a deal here, that is another matter. Because I know this, President Trump is not going to make a bad deal. He knows these guys. He's negotiated with them more than any previous president has. And he knows they're full of BS at times. They're going to obfuscate. They're going to promote lies. And our team obviously has to be aware of all of that going into it. I'm assuming that they understand that. The backstop we have here is the president himself. Yeah. He's not going to take a bad deal. If we return to combat operations, so our audience understands, we do have an ace in the hole here, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We do have a strategic asset that we can put to employ here, and that is Kharg Island. Kharg Island, we can wait to the very end of our operations and take control of it or destroy it. If we take control of it, we can use it as leverage with the Iranians. 90% of their oil distribution comes from Kharg Island. The first thing we would say to them is you have to give up all of your nuclear enterprise to us. You have to hand it over. The enriched uranium, what centrifuges you got left, what cascades you got left, the same deal that Bush imposed on Gaddafi when we went in and dismembered and took away the program, and other things we can use Kharg Island for. If you don't do that, then we're going to destroy 90% of your oil distribution. That would likely collapse the regime in terms of its economic capability. It would cause an economic collapse. So we still have leverage here is what my point is, Martha.
President Trump is not going to make a bad deal. He knows these guys, full of BS. The backstop that we have here is the president himself. We do have a strategic asset. That is Kharg Island. 90% of their oil distribution comes from Kharg Island. Give up all of your nuclear enterprise, or we are going to destroy 90% of your oil distribution. That would likely collapse the regime. Analysis. Keane highlights Trump's personal knowledge. He knows these guys, full of BS, as the ultimate backstop. The real game-changer introduced is Kharg Island, described as the choke point where 90% of their oil distribution flows. Controlling or destroying it could force Iran to give up all of your nuclear enterprise or face economic collapse. The words ACE in the whole underscore that the U.S. retains overwhelming escalation options even during talks. Takeaway: knowing your adversary personally plus holding a decisive economic target, like Kharg Island, creates unbreakable negotiating power. Would Kharg Island be the ultimate pressure point?
Iran imposing those tolls, clearly in violation of the Sea of Law. This is not Egypt, where they have a toll or a fee because it's Egypt land that the Suez Canal is on. It's not Panama, the same thing. Panama's land. This is international transit waterway. That's right. And you're prohibited from doing just that. And we should force the Iranians to knock that off, in my judgment.
All right.
Iran imposing those tools clearly is a violation. This is international transit waterway, and you are prohibited from doing just that. We should force the Iranians to knock that off. The president says he might want a piece of that cost to go through. Analysis. Martha raises the potential $100 billion yearly windfall from tolls on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Keane immediately labels it a violation, contrasting it with legal tolls in the Suez or Panama, and insisting the strait is an international transit waterway. He urges the U.S. to force the Iranians to knock that OFF, while noting the president's interest in securing a piece of that cost. The exchange shows how even economic side deals remain flashpoints under international law. Takeaway: unilateral tolls on international waterways violate long-standing norms. Any deal must address this or risk renewed confrontation. What do you think? Should the U.S. claim a share of those tolls or shut them down entirely?